Uncommon Sense with Junia Doan, sharing the wisdom and insight of those who have been there and done that.
With me today is Etcyl Blair. I've known Etcyl for a long number of years now, and I can truly attest to his breadth of ideas, his energy, his enthusiasm for life, and his bedrock American values, or even better, bedrock American virtues, and his sincere depth of knowledge in a number of fields. So Etcyl, when you get surprised by life, even a negative surprise, what do you say to yourself?
It depends on the blow, I guess. I frequently say, why me?
Yeah.
What,
I said that myself.
why did I deserve this?
Yeah.
I guess it's part of maybe the makeup you have, your nature. To a degree, I credit my mother with a lot of my responses this way, because I can remember as a kid, I'd get hurt. I wasn't the biggest guy on the street, you know, and I'd get banged up, go home, well, she'd dust me off, pick me up, and send me back out again, you know, and say, well,
What would she say to you?
Get out there and take care of yourself. You know, don't get in a fight then, you know, if you get beat up all the time. Figure some other way around. And I've often thought about that. Don't always get in a fight. I've tried to be a good listener and figure out really where we headed. What does this all mean? What can I do about it?
What does it mean to be a good listener?
A good listener is a person who gets all the people around that he's involved with, or she is involved with, and gets their opinions, instead of coming out too soon and getting your opinion out there. Because certain people will then line up, and you don't really get to know what it is that they're thinking about, what they want to do. And I found this helped me very much over the years in Dow, because many times I ended up involved in organizations. I couldn't even speak the language of the technical aspects of the groups of people I was working with. So I learned to keep my mouth shut many times and listen to others, and then to use them to help me out. And they became my supporters in long term. I was their supporters, and I think that way you multiply and doubly so your efforts to whatever you're trying to do.
So hearing people is the beginning of not only increasing the options, you know, what you hear, but really helping you with good long-term relationships.
Right, it helps not only in that, I think it puts you on a better pedestal in which to direct the long-term direction you're going to go. Because if you sort of have moved yourself into a leadership role, in which in some cases I was, then by getting everybody to express an opinion, get a point of view, then you're able to, others having heard those points of views, you're able to then kind of bend or blend the thing together, and everybody then agrees to a plan, and you move forward on it.
Now, is this what you learned in childhood when your mother sent you back outside?
Not necessarily. I don't know that I learned to be a good listener, but I think that what I learned from her was that don't let it get you down. Be positive. Get in there and you know, make yourself become a part of what you're involved in. Don't run away. And I've tried to adhere to those principles over my life, and I think to a degree it's paid off. I don't always know what you're going to get into or what comes afterwards, but if you do the proper thing early, well, you'll handle those that come later on.
But what worked when you were a kid, though?
Well, you know, when I was a kid was a long, long time ago.
And I bet you remember it.
Oh, I remember lots of it. You know, it's the Depression days, times when, you know, at Christmas you'd have a quarter to spend. That would be the whole amount. And delivering newspapers and, you know, doing all kinds of things just to make a few pennies to spend. So I think I've learned things over the years that have helped me later in life, maybe more so than what I learned in the colleges and in the textbooks.
Now that's a lesson right there. The knowledge can come from many sources.
That is correct.
Through experience, you know, for one, is what you're saying.
Living a life and then learning from living a life. You know, it's and I've always had a respect for people who asked me to do things, well, just like you having asked me to do things on Matrix. I took that deeply, that thought of doing something in Matrix, and I've continued to do that. I just sort of pick out certain people that I have a high respect for, and I'll do what they want me to do and try to do it in a constructive, positive manner.
I should say when we were starting Matrix long years ago, Matrix Midland Festival, I asked Etcyl to be our first chairman of a newly formed subcommittee called, of the program committee called the Science Committee, Science Subcommittee. And he attracted all the best people at Dow and Dow Corning, Turner Alfrey, Ray Boyer, MMI. We went around, and of course Etcyl. And I sat in on those. It was a tutorial for me. But really out of that kind of volunteer effort, you know, and the originality
Right.
of mind
Right.
and the knowledge there, we came
Right.
up with some very
Really
current and
unique
useful programs. Right.
Right.
So you would say associating yourself, I mean, I don't put that in a category necessarily of people you totally respect or want to respect, but anyway, that you'd be willing to try something new but associate yourself with good people.
Right. Well, I think challenges are really what makes an individual, develops character. And I think of a challenge that I had at Dow when I was in the Egg Organics department of my family and I getting ready to go on a vacation. And Mac Pruitt was my boss in those days, and he said, Etcyl, we have a problem. We were to appear in Washington in a kind of a court hearing. I didn't realize that Ralph Nader kinds of people would be involved. And I went home that night and said to Ruth, you know, our vacation is gone. You know, I've got to go to Washington to do I don't know what. So I put a great team together. We went to Washington, and there we were pretty well carved up by the bureaucrats, by the environmentalists. I didn't really understand court proceedings as they take place today in our society, with television cameras trained in on you and all kinds of questions you're being asked under oath. And when that was over, I came back to Midland and looked Mr. Pruitt up.
Just pause one moment. What did you expect, and what was the reality when you got there? What were they looking for? How was it organized?
The team of experts that we took with us, they were from Texas, they were from the Michigan division, they were organic chemists, they were doctors, they were toxicologists, all kinds of technical people like this.
Right.
And what we were working on was we were going to present the toxicological information, the health information, assess risk and that kind of thing. And they didn't seem to be interested in that.
What were they interested in?
Well, what they would do is they would pull out a name of some individual in that particular field and say, do you know so-and-so? I would say, no, I don't. Well, then how can you be here without knowing who that person is when he says this over here? Well, the whole thing became that kind of an argument and did not deal with the facts that we tried to present to them. So it became a trying to present science in a non-science world. They were not really interested in that.
They weren't interested in what you had to say about what you knew.
That's right, not really.
What do you think they were interested in? What was your impression?
I think they were interested in trying to show that industry was not believable. It did not, just like you hear today, hear many things today, they have not done any science on this. Mm-hmm. All the work that was done on these products was done in industry in the field of toxicology, would be by the finest toxicologists there are in the world today. This kind of stuff is blown aside because they say, well, that's paid for by industry. As a result, see, it's no good. Mm-hmm. And so these are the kinds of things that I had to deal with. And there's hard.
It must have been dispiriting.
It was very dispiriting, and I was dispirited. When I came home, I said to Pruitt, he was at his house, he was ill, I said, Mac, please don't ever ask me to do a thing like that again. And I got ready to leave, and Mac got up out of bed and said, well, Etcyl, he said, this is going to be a big problem for Dow long term. I was going to ask you to do this full time. And I was stunned. I was really stunned because I loved my job. I was in ag research and agriculture, and I had worked as a chemist in the field of agriculture and traveling everywhere in the world dealing with agricultural problems. And suddenly there was this thing, dealing with lawyers and environmentalists and bureaucrats in Washington. And I came back the next day and said, I'll do it, Mac. And actually, it was the best thing that ever happened to me in Dow. It was the most exciting life, and I learned to have a new way to have to deal with people and science.
Which is what?
And that. Well, again, you need to be a good listener and find out really what's the agenda here. You know, it's listed as such and such, but is there another agenda beneath that? Is it really fact-finding, or is it just a facade to get you in there, to get you to in a not very uncomfortable situation? Kind of like the Earth Day affairs down at Ann Arbor in Michigan, when some of us were put through a Nuremberg trial down there. We were asked to come down.
Oh, really? Well, I don't know about that. What happened?
Present data. Well, there were 3 of us from Midland who were sent down. I was to represent science and technology, and the environmental fact group down there was their day. They took over. They held us in a room. They conducted what they called
What do
a
you mean
Nuremberg.
they held you in a room?
We were in a big auditorium there at the Student Union, in a locked room. In fact,
Who
when we
locked it?
showed up, the students, you couldn't get out. You could not get out. You could physically not move. And when we arrived, we were put in a room and said to stay there for our own safety's sake. You know, there were people were carrying torches. At the time we left there, I was not sure they were not going to burn that building down.
And what year was this?
This was the year when we were very involved in Vietnam. Of course, Dow was
Late 60s.
an Agent Orange, and to a degree, the herbicide 2,4,5-T and 2,4-D, the part of Agent Orange, and I was the research director for that group, see. And but Agent Orange was not a product of Dow. It was a military weapon, which the military people made. But this is the kind of
But
world.
when you got into this room and the environmentalists,
Okay.
what actually happened?
All right, what happened
What was their agenda? I mean, how did that play out? What was said?
okay,
or
this
what
was all on television.
Right.
It was to be played, of course, in the student, for the students. And a fellow professor by the name of Dr. Bayer, who was a biochemist or biologist of some sort. He had beads around his neck. He had his shirt was opened up to his belly, and he walked in with me, and he carried a gigantic sign as he brought. It said, "Dow burns babies." And that was when I knew we were in a different arena. You know, this was not what the arena I thought we were going to be in. And so I decided that we're going to do what we were asked to do by the administration, and that was talk about how Dow develops products.
The school administration.
The school administration, because this was not, they did not plan that this way.
Oh.
And I was going to the other groups were going to talk about how we develop information in the third world, and these are the kind of subjects we dealt with, and I insisted and would not allow them to yell and shout such that we could not stand there and give our delivery. And every one of us gave our pitches, although the noise level was terribly intense. And when this was over, one of the big guards came up to us, who was a policeman, and said, "It's time, we must get out of here, because this is getting too dangerous for us." So as we left, people spit on us, they hit us with newspapers, and we got in the cars to leave, and the police said to us, "I wish we could go to Midland with you." So this was kind of the world that came through in that time. But, you know, I think I'm wiser and bigger as a result of it. This was just one of the brief encounters I've had over my life with Dow, but it was very exciting, and I've had some great successes in this world.
What are some of the others? I mean, you said yes to a job you didn't want. How
Right.
come?
Well, I have always believed that there are other people in your sphere that see things that you don't always see, and maybe I was very comfortable in ag organics. It was an area that I had been associated with a long time and knew a lot of the people out there, so you can kind of say that was my nest. You know, I had finally arrived. In fact, at one time when I was in the organic laboratory, Julius Johnson gave me a lesson there, because I'd spent 15 years starting out as a research chemist, and I was an organophosphate chemist, and things like Dursban and a whole group of products came out of this kind of chemistry. And I finally had become the research director, and I just arrived at that, and I thought, man, because to me, to be the head of the E.C. Britton Research Laboratory was it. You know, I
Right.
couldn't think of a better job at Dow. One day I had a call from Julius Johnson. "Etcyl, would you like to have you move out to become head of the agricultural department?" What? I'm a chemist. I'm not really an agriculturalist. You know,
Yeah.
I've worked in the agricultural field. And I said, "But Julius, I just arrived here." And Julius said to me a very, very great statement. Etcyl, there's nothing more you can do in that area. You have done it all. Move into a new field. So I said, okay. See, I respected Julius. And there's certain people you pick out, I think, in life that see something further beyond and they need some help. Obviously, he wanted me there. So I decided, well, he has faith in me, I'm going to go do it. And that was a great job. And finally, I worked for Nagley, who was a wonderful person to work for. It was very helpful in many, many fields. And then this thing from Pruitt came. See, and it ultimately became that thing too. Dow became the most important company, I think, in all the world in this field at that time. We had more science data in the fields of toxicology and health than anybody else. And it was just great to be able to put these teams together and go into various parts of our country and with our government and with other governments and bring these people to play like a gigantic football game. And we would, we didn't win them all, but we did very well.
It sounds like that. By saying yes to something you really would rather have not done, the world opened up in ways that you couldn't have even put down on a list of the possible pros.
That's right.
Of taking a job like that.
Yeah.
And so you became a different kind of person, or you were like more.
I think I was a bigger person, a more broad person. I had new opportunities to experience different events I would never have experienced. And I think that even goes back to the time of World War II. I went to college originally to become a pilot. I wanted to fly an airplane. All my life as a kid, I built airplanes, I made models, I did this. And the college was in my hometown, and I could live at home, and it wasn't all that expensive. And my mother worked hard to get me there. So I took my junior year, my sophomore year, I should say, I took flying, and I got a pilot's license. And I was going to go, at that time the war had started with Japan, when the Japanese bombed us. And so I was going to go, and I volunteered, but I was to be allowed to stay in college until I finished my degree. That didn't happen. We were called up, but I was forced out.
Because?
I was colorblind. And I can see
Something
color.
you didn't know before.
Well, I knew, but I was borderline. I mean, I can see colors, and I can tell that this is a green, and I can see reds and this and that. I'm red-green colorblind, but I cannot read these books that have these numbers on them. Mm-hmm. And I always accuse the Japanese of making those books that can't be
special
flying airplanes.
Well, of course, you take flying lessons.
Because I want to be a flyer.
Just independently of,
right. I just wanted to be able to have a license to fly airplanes. And the result of that was, all my friends were flyers, but the result of that was, as far as I know, only one of them ever survived. I ended up, ultimately, in bacteriological warfare, of all things, working on anthrax.
Oh,
if you
really?
Believe it, if you could believe it. That's right. Now, I was just a chemist at that time. I did not have my degree yet, and so I worked on developing formulations so you could grow the organisms. And I was not a biologist, so I never had any contact with the organisms themselves, and so we would prepare these various kinds of nutritional substances, and the biologists would take them, and this was at Fort Detrick, Maryland, which was the big chemical warfare station for the military.
So
that introduced me to science. See,
yeah.
Really, I saw science then not as a part of a college curriculum.
Right.
Science in the real.
Science as a what?
In the real world.
Yes.
Science as a technology.
Something useful.
Something useful. In this particular, it might have been a
Something
military,
necessary.
but necessary, And
Right.
so I decided then, when the war was over, I should get into science.
Did you have an idea of what kind of science?
I fell toward organic chemistry. I don't know particularly why. I just like the idea of being able to manipulate these molecules around. I had a hankering for the biological side of it, but I never had any biology. And so I had ended up really with a triple major with mathematics, chemistry, and physics. And at our college, then I taught for a year and a half after that.
You taught?
Before I went to graduate school.
Where did you teach?
I taught there at Southwestern College. I taught organic chemistry analytical chemistry, and mathematics, algebra.
And how did you find Dow or Dow find you?
That is an interesting story because I'd never heard of Dow Chemical Company. I was at Kansas State working on my doctorate, and in those days, see, the war was over. There was a Korean War going on, and the industries would send out people to recruit.
Mm-hmm.
And an individual came through, and I interviewed him, and he was from Dow, but I interviewed DuPont, interviewed Exxon, all the big companies. And so I was on the list to go visit Dow, to go visit DuPont, to go visit Exxon, to go visit Eastman Kodak, and all those. And when I was in Midland, Ralph Perkins was the assistant to Edgar C. Britton, who was the head of the organic laboratory. And little did I know that he loved music. Well, I was a frustrated violin player, and so he got interested in me. And before I left Midland, he had signed me up to be a part of the Midland Symphony, or at that time the Dow Symphony Orchestra. So again, you know, by going and doing these things, suddenly a whole new world opened up. And I came to Midland, and I've never left.
Oh, to our benefit.
Yeah, well, to my happiness too.
So I think what you're saying, Etcyl, is that, first of all, you can never predict where your life is going.
That's correct.
Right. And to follow your interests, what we've learned from Etcyl today is, firstly, do everything with character. And secondly, to listen to others. And you see in his life, he listened to himself about the flying, but he listened to others about kind of the job or the orchestra. And in doing so, he learned and had experiences in life he could in no way predicted, even by doing things that didn't seem totally what he wanted to do at the time, by job choice. So this is something to think about as we all find these kind of incidences coming our way in our life. Please thank Etcyl for sharing with us today. Please join us another time when we have our next show. And remember, kindness counts. Thank you.